3 people are now charged in the death of Payne, just weeks after the One Direction singer fell from the balcony of his hotel room. The suspects include a hotel employee, alleged drug dealer, and a third person who was with Payne in the days leading up to his death. They're facing charges of abandonment of a person followed by death, supply and facilitation of narcotics. Lots of new information revealed in the case, and we're breaking it all down with former prosecutor Melba Pearson. I'm Gillespie, and this is Law and Crime News. It's been less than a month since the shocking death of 31-year-old Payne, the British singer who rose to fame as part of the boy band One Direction. Leading up to Payne's death, he was in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to visit his former 1D bandmate, Niall Horan. At the time, Payne was staying at Casa Sur Hotel in the Palermo neighborhood. It was there that Payne took a fatal fall from his third-floor balcony, landing in the hotel courtyard. It happened on October 16th at about 5 o'clock that evening. Hotel employees reported hearing a loud thud in that courtyard area before Payne's body was ultimately found. Ahead of that, hotel employees had already contacted emergency responders, reporting there was a guest who was off his head with drugs and acting erratically. The worker on the phone reportedly said, quote, "I don't know if the guest's life is in danger. The room has a balcony, and we are afraid he might do something." By the time first responders arrived, Payne had already fallen from the balcony. Investigators later determined his cause of death to be trauma and internal and external hemorrhage caused by this fall. Officials also say they can rule out self-harm. I want to thank Upside for sponsoring today's Law and Crime YouTube takeover. Upside is a free app that gets you cash back on gas and groceries. And yes, this is actually free cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. And it's truly so simple and easy to use. Once you have the Upside app, you can claim an offer for whatever you're buying. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card and then follow the steps on the app to get paid. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside, or scan the QR code on your screen and use our promo code LCTakeover to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. As part of the autopsy, investigators found an alarming amount of drugs in Payne's system. Experts tested both his blood and urine, showing he had traces of alcohol, cocaine, prescription antidepressants, and something known as pink cocaine. It's a drug cocktail that is typically mixed ecstasy, ketamine, and caffeine. Inside Payne's hotel room, officials found at least 4 supplies of narcotics and other drug paraphernalia, including a burnt candle, burnt soda can top, a piece of aluminum foil, and a Dove soap carton that authorities believe was used to secretly hand off drugs to Payne. Investigators also believe at the time of his fall, Payne was either partially or completely unconscious. Following Payne's death, Argentinian authorities conducted 9 searches of the hotel, a friend's home, and other areas nearby. According to the Argentinian National Criminal and Correction Prosecutor's Office, investigators conducted several dozen interviews during this time, speaking with the hotel staff, family members, friends, medical professionals, biochemists, and even psychiatrists. On top of that, they reviewed more than 800 hours of video from both the hotel security cameras and other cameras on the public roads nearby. Authorities also looked through Payne's phone, analyzing his calls, text messages, and social media accounts. On Thursday, prosecutors brought forth a 180-page ruling requesting the arrest and questioning of 3 suspects. Authorities say these 3 are responsible for illicit conduct in Payne's death. They've since been charged with abandonment of a person followed by death, supply and facilitation of narcotics. We don't know the suspects' names yet, but we do have an idea of how they were related to Payne. The first suspect is a person who police say, quote, accompanied the artist on a daily basis during his stay in the city of Buenos Aires. This suspect is charged with abandonment of a person followed by death. The second suspect is a hotel employee who, according to the press release, must answer for 2 proven supplies of cocaine to Payne during the time he was in the hotel. The third suspect is an accused drug supplier who allegedly provided Payne with drugs twice on October 14th. The latter 2 suspects are both charged with supplying narcotics. While these 3 suspects have been charged, Argentinian officials say Payne's death is still under investigation, and experts are still looking through other devices and evidence they've collected. They're also taking a look at Payne's medical history prior to his time in Argentina. So, to break down what we know so far about this heartbreaking case, we're joined now by former prosecutor Melba Pearson. And Melba, it's great as always to have you on with us.
Sierra, always great to be on with you as well.
So, this is a story a lot of people have been following because obviously Liam Payne is a very well known musician, beloved across the world, really. So, this case specifically, do you think it's appropriate that these three people were charged in relation to the facts as we know them?
I think that this arrest was definitely appropriate based on the context from Argentinian law. Basically, it sounded like these people were very close to him and not only got him the drugs, but also realized that he was highly inebriated and not able to really function. So it seems that there was a duty to intervene for those folks to, make sure that Liam was okay and could get to a safe place, could be in bed and not be on the balcony, which resulted in his death. So it seems to be almost parallel to the laws we're seeing now around charging drug dealers. We saw that in the Matthew Perry case where the person that actually got him the fentanyl that resulted in his overdose got charged in connection with his death. So it seems to be somewhat similar based on what we're hearing and seeing in terms of the facts.
Let's take a look at the charges, though, as we know them, kind of breaking them down. The first one is abandonment of a person followed by death. And I'm wondering if that's exactly what it sounds like, that this person was abandoned, Liam Payne, after his death.
Yeah, it sounded like, and again, I'm not an expert on Argentinian law, but based on what the facts say, the facts that are publicly available, and based on what the news reporting is saying, it seems to me that, again, it's that duty to intervene, that you're with someone and you can see that they're in distress. And instead of trying to get them medical attention or get them some kind of assistance, you turn around, walk away. It almost sounds like a good Samaritan law gone awry in a way, and I wouldn't say awry because I certainly don't want to insult their legal system, but, it just almost sounds like all of us have a duty to look out for each other. We know that morally, but it sounds like they've codified that in the law in Argentina.
Right, kind of like they're compelled to act because this person was in peril and obviously needed their assistance. The other charges, though, kind of make a bit more sense in relation to the drug thing. That's supply and facilitation of narcotics. I mean, is this as simple as it sounds? They brought him the drugs and then he ingested them?
Yeah, it sounds exactly, again, tragically like what happened to Matthew Perry, where his assistant went out and got him the drugs that eventually caused his demise. So again, I think that this is going to have a broader impact in terms of all of these high profile celebrities that will have their assistants do everything from get the dry cleaning to get their drugs. So now assistants have to think twice in terms of what am I willing to do for this job? Yes, I'm working for this amazing celebrity. Yes, I have all this access and maybe not getting paid the greatest, but I get to go to great parties and rub shoulders with, folks I would never interact with. But at the same token, if your boss is asking you to get drugs, you may end up being on the hook in terms of criminal liability if you go ahead and do that. So I think it's going to change a lot of the complexion of how these relationships, these employment relationships work in Hollywood and other celebrity arenas.
It's interesting that you brought up that assistant kind of job because it sounds like potentially that's one of the people that was charged. According to the press release, it was someone who was with Liam Payne every day since he'd been in Argentina. That's really all it said, but that kind of got me thinking potentially that was an assistant or someone who was close to him in that way. The other people who were charged, obviously a hotel employee is self-explanatory, and then somebody who's an alleged drug dealer. But we don't know their names yet or their identity. Do you think there's a reason why prosecutors haven't released those?
I'm not quite sure. Again, not having a full understanding of how Argentinian law works. They may have something like, for instance, I'm thinking about the Giselle Pellicot case in France, how under French law, she had the right to have this trial conducted in secret and her name not be released, that sort of thing. I don't know if there's something in terms of preserving the person's identity until they're convicted at trial, which would make sense to me, or something along those lines. Or again, they probably didn't also want the media circus of, it's already terrible that this superstar has tragically passed in their country, but I'm sure they're not looking for additional media attention and just want the focus to be on the justice system, finding some sort of accountability for Liam Payne's death and sort of closing the chapter on that. And also showing that coming to Argentina is safe and they're not going to tolerate, certain types of behavior.
Looking into the investigation into his death, it's been less than a month. So obviously, we've seen some pretty swift motion by way of the Argentinian government. And according to this press release, we know that they really did their due diligence. More than 800 hours of video have been analyzed. Dozens of interviews. They went through Liam Payne's phone, his social media, lots of investigation. So do you think that all of that kind of added up to these charges? They found what they needed and then these charges were then brought?
Absolutely. And again, because of Liam Payne's celebrity status, because of all the media attention, that definitely was an impetus for them to move even more rapidly. I don't know if that would have been the same situation had he not been a celebrity. I hope so. But again, with all of that media attention, it was very incumbent on them. Like, okay, listen, we've got to, get to work here and figure out what happened and hold somebody accountable for his death if the evidence bore out, and it seems that it did.
Investigators have also said that they're not done with their work yet. I mean, they've talked to a lot of people, they've done a lot of research, kind of dug into all of this, but they're not stopping yet. So, what do you think the investigation would look like moving forward?
Yeah, so I think they're going to continue to try to identify people that they may have seen on the video, try to piece together Liam Payne's last hours, last days, and again, figure out who he had contact with. Was he doing drugs at this volume every single night he was there? Who else may have been supplying him drugs, things like that. So I think it's more about reconstructing his last hours and days to figure out if anybody else needs to be held accountable for his death.
And talking about the hours and days leading up to Liam Payne's death, we do now know that he had an alarming amount of drugs in his system. I mean, we've talked about pink cocaine on our show multiple times. Sounds like that's what he had. Alcohol, antidepressants, a lot was found in his system. So we have these three people who were charged, but is it possible that maybe more people could be charged? These people may have facilitated the use of his drugs here, and there could be more charges down the line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't rule anything or take anything off the table at this point, because again, I think Argentinian authorities are going to be as thorough as they possibly can to, again, because of the fact that Liam Payne's such a huge star and this happened in their country, they're going to make it very clear that they are capable of handling these types of cases. They're going to move swiftly. They're going to hold people accountable, and they're going to make sure that there's closure for the Payne family, for the rest of the One Direction band and all of their fans around the world.
We've been talking about this intense investigation and all of the information that they've gone through. But prosecutors brought 180 pages worth of documents when they brought forth these charges. And to me, that sounds like a lot. I mean, if we're just talking about P. Diddy, it was a 14-page indictment. And now this one in Argentina is 180. I mean, does that seem like it was very thorough to you?
Very thorough, very thorough. Again, because they know that all eyes are on them and this case, they're going to want to make sure to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, be as extremely thorough as possible. And also in a way, showcase their criminal justice system. Like, listen, we're highly effective here and we're able to handle these kind of large scale investigations, do so swiftly and get justice. So again, I think this is partly because of the publicity, partly because of national pride, and also partly just because of how sad and how tragic, all of the events were that resulted in his death.
Something that was also mentioned by law enforcement in Argentina is that they're going to look into Liam Payne's medical background before all of this, leading up to it, before he was even in Argentina. And that kind of was a question mark in my mind. Why would they be looking into all of that?
They're probably trying to figure out, based on the toxicology report, again, is this a normal amount of drugs that he was ingesting? Was this an accidental overdose in some ways? And when I say overdose, obviously he did not die directly from an overdose, but again, he may have taken more drugs or a higher quantity or maybe a stronger potency than he's used to. And then that's what resulted in him, going over the balcony in the way that he did. And also, I think they wanted to probably get a better understanding understanding, because I recall hearing that some of his bandmates had talked about how that the pressures of fame were really weighing heavily on him, and he was really struggling and struggling with mental health concerns and depression and things like that. So I think they probably want to understand what his prescribed dosage of his medication was. Was he taking more than what he was prescribed? Was he even prescribed this medication? Let's start even with that. So I think they're just trying to kind of piece together and have a better understanding of his body, his system, what he ingested on a regular basis, to then figure out in terms of how they're going to present the evidence at trial, or if additional charges are appropriate, or if additional defendants would be appropriate.
Okay, so if we're talking about Liam Payne's system, his body, obviously it's important to see what he was like ahead of all of this, his drug use, as you've aptly pointed out. But something we've learned in recent days is that he was potentially fully unconscious at the time of his fall. This is brand new information to us. I mean, he wasn't alert. It seems he could have been partially conscious, but could have been totally unconscious at the time of his fall. Does this play into the case at all?
Well, that's very interesting, because I'd be curious to know then how he went over the balcony if he was fully unconscious. How did he even make it to the balcony? So was this a situation where the people that were involved, the hotel worker, et cetera, maybe they tried to get him out to the balcony for fresh air, thinking that they could, revive him in some way, and something went wrong? Maybe he regained consciousness and, again, was disoriented, and that's what resulted in him going over the balcony. Again, we don't know at this juncture, and that's hopefully what the investigation will tell us. It's highly unlikely that there's going to be surveillance video on the actual balcony to show, what happened in those critical last moments. Maybe there could be a situation where one of the people charged may decide to provide evidence in hopes of a lesser penalty in some way, shape, or form. But again, it's going to be very hard to understand what really happened in the room because of the fact that there's likely no cameras. Maybe there's cell phone footage, I don't know, but all of that would be part of the investigation. But they can clearly identify who was in the room and who was around him in his final hours. But again, that last bit is probably going to be a lot harder to find out absent some kind of witness testimony.
Something we have to talk about in this case, and we kind of have throughout our interview, is the fact that this happened in Argentina. Obviously, we're more familiar with law here in the United States, so there are notable differences. But if this were to go to trial as it moves forward in the justice system down there, do you have any inferences of what that could look like?
Again, I don't have a ton of familiarity, so this one is really hard, and I'm going to be watching just to learn, right? Because that's part of the thing that's interesting for me, is watching different legal systems and kind of comparing it to our own and seeing how they handle these types of situations. So, I'm curious to see whether this is something that is only tried by a judge, or if there's a jury, and sort of how they handle the publicity around this case. Are they going to allow cameras in the courtroom, or is this going to be a closed trial type of situation? I have lots of questions as well, so I'm going to be watching with great interest and to learn and to understand more about how this process will work.
I think you're right about that all eyes are really on this case because it was a heartbreaking loss. There's still a lot of questions surrounding it. And that also gets me wondering if people want to become involved in the case. I mean that in saying, if somebody knows something now that they've kind of been sitting on, do you think it's possible that they could come forward and say, people are still talking about this. This is obviously very important. Here's what I saw, or here's what I know, if investigators would find that information useful?
Yeah, I could see that happening, but I can also see the other side of that happening, where people are afraid that if they come forward with information, they too might get charged or get pulled into the situation. So, I think it depends on if it's one of those situations where you just happen to, let's say, hypothetically, he was in a club earlier that night. You happened to be at the same club and you saw certain things. Maybe you may want to share that. But at the same token, if you were maybe partying with him, you might be a little bit hesitant to share what you know out of fear that you too might get charged. So it could cut both ways. It definitely could cut both ways.
Obviously, still a lot of questions in this case, and we know the investigation is ongoing, so it's one we'll continue to follow. But Melba, thank you so much for coming on and breaking down what we do know so far.
Absolutely, Sierra. Thank you.
Again, Payne's death is still under investigation. Meanwhile, his body has been returned to his father, Jeff Payne. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.